Hari Om Padmaji. Let us contemplate on Moghasha today.
Yes, sir. Moghasha moghakarmano moghatnyana vicetasaha rakshasīmāsūrīṃ chaiva prakritim mohinim shritaha.
Once again, please.
Moghasha moghakarmano moghatnyana vicetasaha rakshasīmāsūrīṃ chaiva prakritim mohinim shritaha.
Very nice.
Moghashaha of vain hopes, Mogha karmanaha of vain actions, Mogha jnanaha of vain knowledge, Vichetasaha senseless, Rakshasim devilish, Asurim undivine, Cha and Eva verily, Prakritim nature, Mohini deceitful, Shritaha boast of. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views, only body-mind based thinking and actions. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated.
Very nice. Thank you, Padmaji. So this is what Sri Krishna is saying. Those who are attracted by demonic, asurim, so those who are attracted by these kinds of qualities are not able to attain liberation. In other words, the hopes of the liberation will be defeated. So what is that Sri Krishna is saying here? He's specifically drawing attention to two kinds of qualities. Rakshasa, Asuri. What does that mean? Demonic and atheistic. What does demonic mean and what does atheistic mean?
Atheistic is someone who doesn't believe in God.
Someone who doesn't believe in the existence of God.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So he could also have a view like I am God or something like that. Because he doesn't believe in any other power. He must believe that he himself is the supreme. Like for example, in the case of Ravana.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ravana is somebody like that is what I feel.
Aham is more.
But Ravana was a Shiva Bhakta also.
That is true.
Yeah. I think after getting the boons, they all turn around. Most of the cases, I think it's like that if we go in the Purana.
Even though he was a Shiva Bhakta, even though he was a Shiva Bhakta, his Aham was more than his Shiva Bhakti. That is what was his downfall.
Excellent. So Shubhaji is saying that it is essentially where the Aham, the pride of the Aham. So there is a Aham for even Sadguru who is teaching, there is a Aham. So is there a difference then? Is it the absence of the Aham that makes one divine, or is it the refined Aham? How do you see
I
it?
think it's the ahankara. I think, sir, there is a difference between aham and ahankara, right?
Aham is I, who I am.
Yeah.
Ahankara is, akara means the shape. Who I am, a shape of who I am
Hmm.
is ahankara. Aham plus akara is ahankara.
The way we use it makes the difference, sir.
Okay. Can you
Yeah,
define it further?
Ravana used it in a wrong way,
Uh,
but if it was Vibhishana used it in the right way, so that was the difference.
so it is not really the absence of the ahankara, but it is the channelization of the ahankara is what you are essentially indicating.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So why is Krishna drawing our attention to demonic and atheistic views? So demonic, is it then right to say that demonic means where there is more of, how great I am, how wonderful I am, how others are lesser? Is that what can I call as demonic?
No sattvic guna.
Meaning what?
More of based on the picture I'm saying,
Yeah.
more of rajasika and tamasika guna you have, so you end up being demonic.
Meaning what? What is the quality or what is the outside appearance of tamasic and rajasic activities?
You tend to do more of wrong activities like what Ravana did.
So even
Use his power for the destruction.
even in sattvic activities, there is activity happening. There is activity happening in rajasic also. When the rajasic quality is more, there is activity happening. When tamasic guna is more, less of activity. That's why the example of Kumbhakarna. But what is the difference in these three?
Probably sattvic more towards the good path. In rajasic and tamasic, there is no doing any good for the others.
Okay, very nice. Saranji, you want to say something?
I would say, yeah, so confused by or like misunderstanding of the body and like really believing on the strength, current state of the body, right? And that action doing harm to others, right? I think that's what I see as demonic. Yeah, taking the body as real and like going by the nature of the body, completely believing on that and confused and taking that as the truth, and the actions are all like that makes the actions rajasic.
Very nice. So you are essentially saying actions which are born out of the pride of the ego are demonic.
Demonic, yeah, causing harm to others, right? Yeah.
Which may tend to cause harm to others.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a I want to win attitude.
The power.
Maybe even at the cost of others losing, but I want to win.
Mm-hmm.
So that I alone want to win is the demonic attitude.
I am the supreme kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I am the supreme may or may not be known, but I want to win in all situations. So that
I am supreme more from the body point of view, looking at other beings, right, at that level. Yeah.
Excellent. So
the
that
kind
is what
of
term as demonic.
dictators and others. Yeah.
Okay. Why is atheistic being brought here? Is Krishna suggesting that one has to believe in God? Is that what he's saying?
I think believing in God is also about believing in your higher power, right? That is why I think the body mind is specified here.
Can you elaborate on that, Padmaji?
Okay, like for example, if say Ravana wanted to, if Ravana knew that the inner being in him is again the supreme, maybe outwardly he wouldn't crave for all that power and whatever he achieved through his penance. So although he was a Shiva Bhakta, he did not get anything for his country or anything, even though he was a Raja. All he cared was about how powerful he is and how he can conquer the world, and even he coveted for Rama's wife. So that is how he saw it. I think if he believed that his inner being is the belief in God is similar to belief in yourself also, I feel, because ultimately you are part of that supreme only.
So in a way, can we say that, when the pride of the ego is higher, there is a tendency to get separated from the others. So naturally there is a me and the you feeling, which essentially means that I fail to see the divine in the other.
Yeah.
So atheism here, existence of the divine power, the true quality is that Shiva is in you, Shiva is in me, Shiva is in all beings. So if Shiva is in all beings, how would I treat you? So atheistic here doesn't necessarily mean a blind belief, but recognition of the divinity in all and recognition that the existence is divine. That quality is missing because the mind is bewildered by the pride of the ego.
In the modern worldview, can I say, like, the quality that leads to discrimination of people based on color, based on gender, based on country or state, or like whatever all the evident outwardly things, using that to decide and discriminate, right? And not going beyond that, not being able to see beyond that.
Correct.
And which is the root cause of all the problems.
So the fundamental root cause is I thinking that I am the body and I am the mind. And the content of my mind is the best, my thoughts, my ideas, my statements. You're not listening to me. All these are indications that, the me thoughts are more possessive. So when that me thoughts are possessive, so why is then there's a connection to the tamasic and the rajasic? Is tamasic means that it is a dull state of being, more like Kumbhakarna, eat, sleep. It's like the very animalistic existence. In the animalistic existence, the mind is not refined at all. So here Krishna is, if you look at it from the Gnana standpoint, Krishna is calling our attention to how the mind is not refined. So unrefined mind, what does it do? An unrefined mind, what does it do? He's not judging, but he is giving the indication. An unrefined mind tends to get involved in tamasic activities, eating, sleeping, those kinds of very animalistic existence. Whereas a rajasic mind gets involved in fulfilling the desires born out of the smaller identity, ego. I have to be the king. I have to be powerful. I have to win. I. that I. So when the Rajasic quality is more, there is activity. Some people tend to be very active, but all the activities are towards gathering things in the world, towards getting something from the world, gaining something from the world. So that's why Krishna is saying here, in that deluded condition, before we go into their hopes for liberation, if you look at their fruitive actions, meaning their actions are born out of, I want to get that. I want to, gain that. I have to get the praise. I want to get the money. I want to get the power. So there is a selfish desire. So that is the fruitive activity, because their activities are born out of, I want to gain. Because I lack something. Because there is deep down, more than the feeling of supreme, deep down, there is a feeling of lack. Because please notice, activities are born out of certain need.
Yeah.
More than Ravana feeling that I'm powerful and supreme, his very action indicates that deep down there is a feeling of lack. Because when that feeling of lack is fulfilled, then the action naturally tends to be sattvic and for the Loka Kalyana. So the actions are born out of, I lack something. So therefore, they're seeking something from the world. But those actions are going to be in vain. So Sri Krishna is saying, all such hopes for liberation or any activity and whatever knowledge they have, all are defeated. Moghasha, Mogha Karmano, Mogha Jnana, all the three are in vain. Meaning, they will not result in the right fruit. What is the right fruit? The right fruit is the liberation. So their activities are born out of egocentric feeling. So therefore, there is still a bondage. There is a continuous cycle of action, seeking the fruit, and if the fruit is gained, further actions. If the fruit is not gained, again further actions, but there is a cycle. The mind is coupled to the fruits. So linked. So
the vasanas get strengthened.
So it is strengthened. You get something, the ego is embellished further. If you don't get something, the ego is insulted. So ego drives the action. Which ego again? We have to distinguish. There is an ego even in a realized being, but that ego is a refined ego. So Vivekananda did missionary work along with teaching. Janaka Maharaja did, along with this, whatever the teaching and various other Jnana Sabhas that he held, he also looked after the country. So their actions will still continue. He had to have the ego of a king. He had to have the ego of a Gnani. So that's actually an oxymoron, ego of a Gnani, but just to indicate to the conversation. So they had to teach. So to teach, one has to have the feeling that I know it and I am channelizing it. So there is a ego of a guru, but that is worn as needed and kept aside when not needed. You all may be aware of that wonderful story of King Janaka. He was sitting with his guru and the Sainika comes running saying that the palace is on fire. King Janaka is totally undisturbed. He says very calmly, please make sure that using water and call the fire brigade and quench the fire. And I'll come after I complete my session with my guru. So there is no worry of losing something. What is more important? Right now, I'm sitting here in front of my guru. And right now, I'm completely involved with my guru's teachings. So like that, ego is an ornament to be worn. Wear the ornament as needed for the harmony in a given situation. But when the ego starts driving, then actions are towards gaining the fruits. Such knowledge itself is self-defeating. Any kind of body-mind-based thinking and actions are self-defeating. In the final scheme of things is what Krishna again is calling our attention to. It's like Shankaracharya's statement, Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam. Why is that happening? Because the ego is connected with gaining something in the world, getting something in the world. And every getting embellishes it further. It's like a fruit has the seed within it, and that seed leads to other fruits. So it's a never-ending cycle. And why is this happening? The mind is connected to the demon. Where is the demon? In me. As what? As my pride and attachment to my own sense of ego. You know who I am. So the root cause of all this is the excessive attachment to my own mind's content, and that to the me and the mind content. Is this all making sense? Shailaja ji, Shilpakala ji, any views from your side?
No, sir, I don't.
Is this, whatever the discussion and whatever we are saying, is it all connecting? Is it all making sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it's all clear, sir.
So again, here Krishna is not prescribing anything. He is drawing our attention to the nature of the things. In a way similar to fire burns if you keep your hand. He is not cursing you to burn your hand or not judging the fire. It is just stating as is the nature of the things, how it is. So how it is, demonic and atheistic views, they delude the mind. And the mind itself is deluded because of excessive attachment to me and the mind thoughts. So sattva guna means a mind which has become subtler. So there are various ways of looking at this. So gross, attachment to gross things is a mind in mostly tamasic and at best rajasic. When you start realizing subtler aspects of life, it is a sattvic quality of the mind. But even that one, like the story of the 3 thieves in the forest, even sattva is a thief. Excessive attachment to the sattva qualities is also an attachment. All the 3 are connected as thieves in this wonderful story. You know, the traveler is bound to the tree by 3 thieves. One of them says, I want to kill you immediately. Another one says, let's just tie him and leave him. Anyway, animals will eat him. The last one says, anyway, we've gotten whatever we wanted. Let's leave him. So if you look at the nature of these three thieves, one of them is completely demonic. Doesn't matter. I want to kill you. I want to take everything from you. I don't have any value for anybody else. I want to grab everything and I want to kill everything. So very destructive mindset. The next one is little refined. Okay, I've taken whatever I wanted, but still I'm not very compassionate towards the other. But I myself want to get away from the sin of cutting you or murdering you. So he's like a hidden thief. It's like the cat, no, which closes its eyes and drinks the milk, thinking that no one else is seeing. So that's the second thief. And the third one still wants to grab, but is a little more compassionate. Okay, let the other one live. And I have grabbed. So these are the three. It's like the comparison to the tamo and the rajo and the sattva guna. But all the three are thieves. So therefore, in this story, to move and to transcend the three is your true nature. That is where your true nature is. However, the sattva helps to calm the mind. So in terms of evolution, a bhogi to a yogi to a gnani, a bhogi is mostly in the tamasic and the rajasic. A yogi has started refining the mind and is becoming more and more sattvic. So love and compassion and those qualities are shining more and more. But still it has not become effortless. And when it completely becomes effortless, then the divine operates. When the mind is no more connected with me and mine, when the mind becomes universal mind. So from a jivi to performing the actions in Ishvara Bhava starts refining the mind. So for whose sake I'm doing everything? I am recognizing the Ishvara and everything is a play of the Ishvara. I'm a servant of the Ishvara. So everything is in offering to Ishvara. So a jivi will then start refining the mind. Mind starts becoming more and more sattvic. Then the Ishvara recognition. So first is recognition of who I am. That can happen only when the mind is refined. And mind, how can mind be refined? Mind can be refined only by action, because the mind is so action oriented in the beginning. That mind has to be purified by performing everything as a service. So in that mind, then who I am, clarity starts emerging. Then who is Ishvara, that clarity starts emerging. So that is the gradual path of liberation. But in a mind that is connected with me and mine, there is no hope, Krishna is saying. There is no hope for liberation. Because the mind is excessively on the material. Saramanji, you want to say something?
Yeah, so it's just like thinking basically, see, it starts with the discrimination in the society, which starts teaching discrimination, and which leads to everyone trying to move up and like seeing that like they have to get better, and the society continues to fuel that. Yeah, you have to get better. Better is something like compared to the other, and it keeps rewarding with power, and then like the other one sees, and so it's a very powerful delusion, right? It's not easy to uh, stand out and say like, oh, I don't subscribe to any of these the views of the views in the Vyavharik level, right? So that's I feel that's what is leading to this confusion and these acts. Is that?
Yeah, that is correct. And that is why, these stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata have been living for thousands of years. When you notice there, it is like our day-to-day drama, but these two stories have been standing for thousands of years. Just to show how all subtle the ego can be. The catch of the ego is very subtle. From a very gross, which can be very easily recognized in just for the sake of the recognition here, Ravana is given. But what is the Ravanatva in me can be maybe easily recognized. But the subtler aspects of Ravana, why Ravana is 10-headed? Because, the ego manifestations can be very subtle. So every time he cuts the head, another head emerges. Or taking the example of the Rakta Bijasura, every drop of the blood leads to another Rakta Bijasura coming. So it's all indicative of the very subtler manifestations of the ego. So, oh, I am a Sattvic, I am doing so much of spiritual activity. He is an ego. Oh, I am helping so many. He is an ego. So now a ego which was I want to possess has now become another kind of spiritual possession ego. So the manifestations of the ego are gross to subtle. So Krishna is again and again, therefore, drawing our attention that how this ego can be very, very gross and very subtle. Because
Even
the clarity that God is, how can this little self exist? So, but in order to go there, in order to have that clarity, the only block is me and my thinking. That is the only block. There is nothing else that is blocking me. And like you rightly said, it is further strengthened by the behavior of the society. So much so that that seems like the right thing to do. And that is why earlier only Krishna warned us that it is not very easy to come out of the power of the Maya. There are billions of
I still feel, even with the knowledge I'm getting, I'm still like the one in the busy market where everything is going, and like I am supposed to not see beyond that, but like things are so attractive, like you just like fall into it again. I'm just still wondering how. It requires a lot of practice to stay attached. It's like not doing can lead to tamasic. So it's not that not doing, at the same time doing, but then again
that's why refine the doing into service. Refine the doing into service.
Service, yeah.
Every doing is an offering, is a yagna. Every doing is a yagna. Every action you offer it to the yagna kunda of the Ishvara. This entire world is an yagna kunda of Ishvara. So your individual actions are an offering to the Ishvara. So first is therefore, the mind has to be subtle enough to grasp the viveka of who I am. Can happen only when the mind is totally peaceful and doesn't have kind of, see the qualities, no shama, dhamma, titiksha, uparati. So they all develop only when the actions are all in sattvic nature. So therefore, in a way, it's a you have to use action only to remove the tendency of the mind to act. But once the action was me oriented, now the action is yajna oriented. And how does that feeling even emerge to snap out of this dream? That's a great mystery. It's a grace, but the grace also comes only when there are some actions which are in some way beneficial to the others. Somewhere deep within, you may recall that cheetah and that baboon. It killed the baboon mother. You recall that video? So the cheetah went and killed the baboon mother, and it saw a little baboon moving. And now something deep within its heart woke up. So now if I rationally want to ask the question, how did it wake up? It's very mysterious. But the fact is that is the true nature of the cheetah, and that's why it just woke up. It was masked by the feeling that I'm a cheetah. The feeling that I'm a cheetah made it to kill, use its instinctive behavior. But deep down, the divine feeling within it enabled it to care for that child. So therefore, that is the inner nature. So the only guidance is, look at the little children, look at how nature operates, look at how sun operates, look at how wind operates. So though it is right in front of me, I get lost in the marketplace.
Yeah.
It's like ignorance and liberation, rather bondage and liberation are the two sides of the same coin. Ignorance and clarity, two sides of the same coin. They exist at the same time. Are there any other questions or any other points?
Was it like, does it like seem to be easier for ones to be in this path and in a ashramic way of life than the life we are in?
That is why we need to understand the word ashrama very clearly. Ashrama. Shrama means where there is effort. Ashrama means where there is no effort. So now, the way we understand ashrama is, a place where people go and study scriptures and are mostly meditating.
Do yajna.
But there is also doing, no?
Yeah.
So there is also doing. So the liberation from the doing hasn't really gone away. So it is not the place of where you're doing, but with what clarity you're doing, that actually makes any place ashrama. That's why great masters said, grihastha ashrama. So every stage of life, they converted into an ashrama only. So the initial phase of the life, they called it as brahmacharya ashrama. Then grihastha ashrama, then vanaprastha ashrama, then sannyasa ashrama. But in all the phases of the life, the major nature of the activity is different. Brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasa. But ashrama is still remaining in all the places. Does it mean that it's a place? So we need to understand this clearly. It's a place also, because a place of knowledge is where, you know, all this continuously happens. It's like a university, it's like a hotel kitchen, and, you know, there continuously similar kind of activities happen. But the true ashrama is not a place. True ashrama is when there is no shrama in whatever you're doing. When is there no shrama in whatever you're doing? When deep down, initially, when you say, I am the doer, to come out of that, the first prescription is do it as a service. Whatever it may be, even your salary work, even you are cleaning the house or helping somebody, do it as a service. So then slowly the mind starts removing its attachment to fruits. So that's the first stage of the ashrama. So slowly, you will start feeling, oh, there is so much of ease in the way I'm doing whatever I'm doing. Even when I'm working in my office, I'm not so stressed anymore. But the ultimate ashrama is when there is no doership, non-doer, but the action is still happening. When I am not the doer, when the action is still happening, then there is complete ashrama. So therefore, ashrama is not a place in the jnana. Ashrama is a way of acting. But a place is also necessary.
It's just that where the society is feeding one kind of culture or rules, knowing the truth and trying to stay away, but still be involved, is the one.
Even the sannyasi, you know, the wearing the kavi dress can have attachment to his langoti. In fact, the same Janaka story, one sannyasi came to Janaka and said that somebody told me you're a great master. I want to learn from you. But you are sitting here in the throne. What kind of a big king are you? Janaka doesn't answer him. Janaka says, okay, please take my atithya. And he gives him a very luxurious room and everything. The sannyasi says, oh, I don't need all this. I just live in a very plain, simple way. But he says, it's okay, please, you know, you come to my palace, I will give you this atithya. So this sannyasi has only apparently 2 langoti. One he wears and another one that he washes and keeps for washing, for drying. So this day, you know, Janaka has taken the sannyasi to some place, and one, you know, Sainika comes running and says that, oh, there is a fire in the palace, everything is burning. Janaka is quite undisturbed, but the sannyasi immediately is running. Oh, what will happen to my langoti? I have only 1 langoti. Janaka's whole palace is burning, is undisturbed. The sannyasi's 1 langoti is so attached. So like that, it is not the dress that I wear that makes me a sannyasi. It is the clarity inside that makes me a sannyasi. So unattached. So the feeling of unattachedness in any action, in any situation, is sannyasa. Samyak nyasaha iti sannyasaha. The right orientation and the deposit of the mind. The mind is deposited on things. The right deposit of the mind towards the self is sannyasa. So therefore, that need not happen only in a place called ashrama. So it's very much, in fact, it is a lot easier for somebody in the grihastha to be a sannyasi. You know, that's why Prabhuji always jokes. The shortest path to liberation is marriage. So when you are getting scolded by the wife or the husband and the fight is happening, you realize the shortest path to liberation is marriage. But when the mind is able to realize all this.
When you're getting praised, you are actually being pushed away.
Ah, your wife is your best guru. You know, the way she can show the mirror to you, nobody else can. Who's your best guru? How great I am. And she holds the mirror. Hey, look at you, idiot fellow. So the greatest guru is in the form of all the household people. Your critics are your greatest gurus. The way they hold the mirror. Therefore, to actually become liberated, it's far easier in a grihastha condition than running away and sitting somewhere. But when the deepening happens, naturally, sometimes some may feel out of the deep compassion to live a life like that and to teach. Therefore, the ashrama paddhati is held in high regard, but one doesn't have to run away to that. So it's a state of the realization.
Okay.
Any other points? All right. Then shall we end our contemplation?